The vast Galactic War College stood as a beacon of military knowledge, attracting the brightest minds from all across the galaxy. It was a place where war was studied like an art, where advanced species honed their skills, and where tactics were crafted by the most intelligent beings. Today, however, was different. Today was a test. Inside the grand simulation chamber, dozens of elite alien students stood at attention. These were the future generals of their respective races, trained in war from birth. Their eyes glowed with excitement as the instructor, an old and battle-hardened Cellari, stepped forward. His reptilian scales shimmered under the artificial lights as he surveyed his students. Today, the instructor announced, his voice carrying through the hall, "You will face a real challenge. You will go up against a squad of humans." A ripple of murmurs spread through the students. Humans, that primitive, unpredictable species. Surely this was a joke. One of the students, a tall, four-armed Sorithian, let out a low chuckle. "With all due respect, sir, is this necessary? The AI combat models already predict a 98% success rate against humans." The instructor's piercing gaze silenced him. "Then prove it," he said. The chamber darkened, and the battlefield simulation activated. The environment around them shifted, pixelated structures forming into a war-torn city. Burning skyscrapers loomed in the distance. Smoke filled the air. The sky was dark with ash. It was a perfect replication of a battlefield. The students checked their weapons. Their eye-assisted helmets scanned the terrain, displaying possible enemy positions, probable ambush zones, and optimized paths of attack. Their technology was leagues ahead of human warfare. Victory was all but guaranteed. The mission was simple: eliminate the human squad before they reached their objective. The enemy had no backup, no heavy artillery, and no technological superiority. Just a handful of soldiers against an elite team of war scholars. The countdown began. 3. Weapons activated, scanners online. The alien students moved into position, their formation precise and flawless. 2. They checked their radar. The humans had to be somewhere close. Yet the scanner showed nothing but static. 1. Silence. Something was wrong. The alien students remained still, their advanced tracking systems sweeping the battlefield, searching for movement. But there was nothing. No signs of life. No heat signatures. The humans were simply gone. "This doesn't make sense," muttered one of the students, adjusting his visor. "They should be here." A sudden, chilling voice crackled through their communication systems. A human voice. "We see you, but you can't see us." A wave of unease rippled through the group. The voice had no clear source. It was distorted, as if coming from all directions at once. Then, without warning, the first attack came. A Sorithian scout, positioned on a high vantage point, let out a sharp cry before vanishing into the shadows. His communication feed cut off instantly. No gunfire, no explosion, just silence. Where did he go? Another student demanded, turning his weapon toward the last known location of his comrade. His HUD displayed nothing. The AI failed to analyze the attack. Then another scream. Another soldier disappeared. Panic set in. "They're using cloaking devices," one of the students yelled. "They must be hiding somewhere." But that didn't make sense. The humans weren't supposed to have cloaking technology advanced enough to bypass their scanners. This was impossible. The instructor watched from a control room above, his expression unreadable. He had seen this before. He knew what was coming next. On the battlefield, the alien squad regrouped, forming a tight defensive circle. Their eye-assisted targeting systems scanned the buildings, the streets, the rooftops. Nothing. It was as if the battlefield itself had turned against them. Then, a glint of light. A single bullet. It struck the ground between them, harmless but deliberate. A message. The students raised their weapons, aiming in all directions. But before they could react, a voice whispered through the comms again, this time colder. "Run. Chaos erupted. The aliens fired in every direction, their weapons illuminating the darkness. Shadows moved between the buildings. Footsteps echoed from above. A grenade rolled to the feet of one of the students, but it didn't explode. It was a fake, a distraction. And then the real attack began. From the darkness, the humans emerged. Not in formation, not following any predictable pattern, but like ghosts in the mist. Each move was unpredictable, each strike precise. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like predators. One alien managed to aim his rifle at a human figure, but before he could fire, his weapon was struck by a blade. The soldier twisted his wrist, disarming the alien in one smooth motion before vanishing back into the shadows. "How are they doing this?" An alien shouted. "Stay together," their leader ordered. "Do not panic." But it was too late. The students were losing their discipline. The battle had only just begun, and already they were on the defensive. And the worst part, the humans weren't even using their full strength yet. The battlefield was in chaos. The alien students, once confident in their AI-driven tactics and superior technology, were now struggling to make sense of what was happening. Their squad was the best of the best, trained in strategy, discipline, and efficiency. But none of their training had prepared them for this. The humans weren't fighting like soldiers. They weren't engaging in traditional combat. They were using tricks, deception, and unpredictable maneuvers that made no logical sense. And yet, they were winning. The Sorithian soldier, his four muscular arms gripping a plasma rifle, scanned the area through his visor. His AI interface was supposed to track every movement on the battlefield, predicting enemy actions before they even happened. But all he could see was static. His system had been compromised. "This isn't possible," he muttered. "Our scanners should be picking them up. They must be jamming our systems," another student said, his voice tense. "But how? Humans don't have this kind of technology." The squad had regrouped, forming a defensive circle. Their helmets displayed battle data in real time, warning them of possible threats. But every time the system marked a movement, it turned out to be nothing. False readings. Decoys. Then something moved in the shadows. One of the students raised his weapon, aiming at a dark alley between two ruined buildings. He could feel something there, watching them. His AI confirmed no presence, but his instincts screamed otherwise. Then the whisper came again. Too slow. A single gunshot rang out. The student felt a sudden, sharp pain in his shoulder. His armor absorbed most of the impact, but the force sent him stumbling backward. Before anyone could react, another shot fired from a completely different direction, striking a second soldier in the leg. He collapsed with a shout. "They're surrounding us," someone yelled. The squad leader clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay calm. "Hold your positions. Don't break formation." But the humans weren't giving them time to think. More shots rang out, forcing the aliens into cover. The students fired back, but their enemies had already moved. They weren't standing still. They weren't engaging in direct combat. They were always shifting, always unpredictable. One alien made a break for higher ground, climbing the ruins of a collapsed building to get a better vantage point. As he reached the top, his helmet sensors beeped, a movement detected behind him. He spun around, weapon raised. Nothing. Just shadows and dust. He exhaled sharply, gripping his weapon tighter. His heart pounded. The battlefield was silent again. Then, a cold voice whispered right behind him, "Looking for something." Before he could react, a human soldier struck, swift and precise. A blade sliced through the air, cutting a deep groove into the alien's rifle. His weapon sparked, disabled in an instant. A sharp kick to his chest sent him tumbling back down the building, landing hard in the rubble below. The others barely had time to process what had happened before a loud explosion rocked the battlefield. Fire erupted from one of their supply crates, destroyed by a well-placed grenade. The squad's ammunition and extra power cells went up in flames. "They're cutting off our resources," one of the students shouted. "They're playing with us," another muttered, "herding us like prey." A sense of dread crept into the minds of the alien students. They were supposed to be in control. Their AI models had analyzed 1,000 battles, prepared them for every possible scenario. And yet, here they were, being outmaneuvered at every turn. Their leader tried to think logically. The humans weren't using superior firepower. They weren't using heavy artillery. They were outnumbered and outgunned. So how were they doing this? Then he realized. The humans weren't fighting the battle the way aliens did. They weren't relying on orders from a central command. They weren't following predictable formations. They were improvising. They were thinking like predators. Before he could issue new orders, movement flickered in his peripheral vision. A shadow sprinted across the battlefield, too fast to track. A second later, a flashbang exploded in the middle of their formation. The blinding light and deafening sound sent several soldiers staggering backward. The humans attacked. They emerged from the ruins, moving fast and striking with precision. One alien lifted his rifle, but before he could fire, a human kicked it out of his hands and slammed an elbow into his chest. The impact sent him crashing to the ground, wind knocked from his lungs. Another student turned just in time to see a blade slicing toward him. He dodged, barely, but the human didn't stop. A second strike, faster than he could react, cut through his shoulder guard. He fell back, his weapon slipping from his grasp. They were losing. The battle had started less than 10 minutes ago, and already half their squad was down. Their AI, their training, their strategies, none of it mattered. The humans weren't fighting by any rulebook. They were adapting on instinct. A desperate voice crackled through the squad's communication channel. "Commander, we need to fall back." The leader hesitated. Retreat. Against a handful of humans, the very idea was humiliating. Then another voice came through. But this one wasn't from his squad. It was from a human. "Leaving so soon." The squad leader froze. The message had come from their own frequency. His blood ran cold. The humans had hacked into their communications. Then the final attack came. A series of controlled explosions detonated around the battlefield, cutting off all possible escape routes. Smoke filled the air. Visibility dropped to near zero. The aliens activated their thermal scanners, only to find them jammed. And then, one by one, they fell. Each human strike was swift, efficient. They didn't waste time. A gunshot, a blade, a perfectly placed trap. The alien students, once the pride of the Galactic War College, were being dismantled like amateurs. The squad leader, dazed and bleeding, looked up just in time to see a figure standing over him. A human. Helmet cracked, armor scratched, eyes cold as steel. The human knelt down slightly, studying him. Then, with a small smirk, he whispered two final words. "Checkmate." And everything went black. Darkness. The squad leader's vision blurred as he regained consciousness. His head throbbed, his armor was damaged, and the battlefield around him was eerily silent. He tried to move, but his limbs felt sluggish. His eye-assisted HUD flickered with error messages, weapon diagnostics failing, communication lines severed, and worst of all, his squad was gone. Had they been eliminated? Captured? He didn't know. But one thing was clear, the humans had won. He clenched his fists. How? How had a group of primitive, technologically inferior beings taken down the brightest warriors of the Galactic War College? Every simulation, every AI model, every tactical assessment had proven human defeat was inevitable. And yet here he was, alone, disarmed, and humiliated. A voice echoed through the ruined battlefield. "You relied on the AI too much." The leader's eyes snapped toward the source. A human soldier emerged from the shadows, his movements calm, almost relaxed. His rifle was slung over his shoulder, showing no urgency, no fear. He knew he had already won. The squad leader pushed himself up. "What?" Did you do? The human smirked. We played a different game. The alien gritted his teeth. That's not possible. Our AI is designed to predict every possible strategy. It adapts. It calculates. It cannot be wrong. The human tilted his head. Your AI is good, but it only understands war like a puzzle, patterns, probabilities, efficiency. That's your weakness. He took a slow step forward. We don't fight like machines. We fight like survivors. The squad leader's mind raced. Machines were logical. They worked with data, numbers, cause and effect. Humans were supposed to be predictable. They should have been easy to defeat. So why hadn't they been? He activated his remaining interface, commanding his AI to analyze the battle. What went wrong? The system compiled all the recorded data, breaking down the fight second by second. The humans had broken formations. Illogical. They had attacked in random patterns. Inefficient. They had refused to retreat when outnumbered. Reckless. And yet, each unpredictable move had led to victory. His AI scrambled for an answer. It calculated, recalculated, cross-referenced thousands of simulations. But no matter how many times it ran the numbers, the result was the same. The humans had defied every probability. The human soldier crouched in front of him, resting his arms on his knees. Your AI thinks war is about efficiency. Ours knows war is about adaptation. The squad leader felt his breathing grow unsteady. That doesn't make sense. There has to be a pattern, a reason. The human chuckled. You still don't get it, do you? He tapped the side of his helmet. War isn't just numbers. It's instinct. The moment you let an eye decide everything for you, you already lost. The squad leader's mind reeled. His people had spent centuries perfecting eye-driven strategy. They had crushed empires, toppled civilizations, all through calculated war models. And now he was being told that instinct, a chaotic, unmeasurable thing, had outmatched all of it. No, that wasn't possible. You think instinct is better than intelligence. He snapped. Not better. Different. The human's expression hardened. Your AI can predict outcomes, but it can't feel fear. It can't improvise under pressure. It can't make a reckless, last-second decision that turns the tide of battle. The squad leader stared at him, his mind spinning. The AI had trained them to follow orders without question. Their battle models were built on logic, probability, and control. But humans thrived in chaos. And that was why they had won. His AI pinged again, desperately trying to offer a countermeasure. Solution. Adjust battle tactics to account for unpredictability. Increase randomization of maneuvers to counter human irregularity. The leader almost laughed. The AI's solution to unpredictability was to become unpredictable. The irony was unbearable. The human stood up, stretching. You know, this is why your kind always loses against us. The alien narrowed his eyes. This has happened before. The soldier shrugged. Every species that relied too much on AI strategy always makes the same mistake. His smirk returned. They assume war is just a game of numbers. The squad leader clenched his fists. He had been raised to believe that war was about control, the side with the best tactics, the best technology, and the best AI would always win. But the humans had shattered that belief in a single battle. The human glanced up at the sky, as if waiting for something. Then his radio crackled. "We're done here," a voice on the other end said. "Pick up in 5. The human turned back to him. "Well, this was fun. See you next time." The squad leader scowled. "You expect me to just accept this defeat?" The soldier gave a lazy salute. "You don't have to accept it, but you will remember it." And then, just like that, he walked away. The squad leader sat there in the rubble, his AI still desperately trying to explain what had happened. But he already knew the answer. Humans had won because they refused to play by the rules. And now, for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if the AI had all the answers. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of scorched metal. Fires crackled in the ruins, casting eerie shadows on the shattered battlefield. The remaining alien soldiers, bruised and battered, regrouped in a defensive formation. Their once unshakable confidence was now gone, replaced by something alien to them: fear. They had trained for war. They had prepared for every possibility. But nothing in their simulations had ever prepared them for this. The humans were closing in. The squad leader took a steadying breath, his four-fingered hand tightening around the hilt of his energy blade. His rifle had been destroyed, and the AI assistance in his visor was still scrambled. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were supposed to crush the humans, not struggle for survival. Movement flickered in the shadows. Fast, silent, untraceable. The leader turned sharply, his blade humming to life, but there was nothing. Just the whisper of wind against the ruined structures. Then, the first strike came. A human soldier lunged from the darkness, knife flashing in the dim firelight. The squad leader barely dodged in time, feeling the blade scrape against his armor. He countered with a powerful slash, but the human was already gone, ducking low and rolling away before the energy blade could connect. The other alien soldiers reacted, but they were too slow. The humans weren't fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like hunters. Gunfire erupted from the side. One of the alien warriors jerked backward, a precise shot hitting the weak point in his armor. Another fell as a blade slipped between his ribs, cutting deep. The leader gritted his teeth. "They're picking us apart." He switched tactics, abandoning defense. He charged. A human appeared in front of him. Slender but fast, their movements almost feral. The leader swung his blade in a wide arc, aiming to cut the human in half. But at the last moment, the human stepped into the attack, closing the distance in an instant. Too close, too fast. The alien's swing went wide, and in that split second of imbalance, the human struck. A brutal elbow to the jaw sent the squad leader stumbling back. Before he could recover, the human's knee crashed into his stomach, followed by a knife driving deep into his shoulder joint. The alien roared in pain, staggering backward. He lashed out wildly, but the human had already melted into the shadows. More of his soldiers fell. The humans didn't fight for control. They fought for dominance. Every move was meant to kill. The squad leader forced himself to focus, breathing hard. His eye was still giving him tactical suggestions, but none of them worked. They were too slow. He shut it off. For the first time in his life, he relied on instinct. The next human that attacked him found a different kind of opponent. The squad leader didn't just react. He anticipated. He twisted away from a knife strike and countered with a vicious punch, feeling the satisfying crack of ribs beneath his fist. The human staggered, but before the leader could finish the attack, another appeared from behind. The alien spun, catching the movement at the last second. His blade flashed, slicing through the human's armor, forcing them to retreat. The humans were fast, but he could be faster. The battle shifted into brutal close combat. No more rifles, no more long-range tactics, just raw instinct and survival. The remaining aliens fought with everything they had, no longer relying on AI calculations or predictive modeling. They dodged, countered, and adapted. The humans had forced them to change. But it wasn't enough. The humans still had one last move. The squad leader barely had time to process what was happening when he heard it. A small metallic clink at his feet. His heart stopped. A grenade. Before he could react, it detonated. The shockwave lifted him off his feet, slamming him into the wreckage of a collapsed building. His vision blurred, his ears rang, and the taste of blood filled his mouth. He struggled to move. His arm wouldn't respond. His body refused to listen. Then he saw them. The last 3 remaining humans, standing over him. Their armor was dented, their faces smeared with dirt and blood. They looked just as exhausted as he felt. But their eyes still burned with that unbreakable fire. One of them, taller than the others, likely their leader, stepped forward and aimed a pistol at the alien's head. His expression was unreadable. For the first time, the squad leader felt true defeat. The human tilted his head. Any last words? The squad leader coughed, his chest aching with the effort. He looked at the destruction around him, at his fallen comrades, at the undeniable proof of human victory. Then he let out a rough, painful laugh. "You forced me to fight without AI," he muttered, spitting blood onto the dirt. His vision swam, but he held the human's gaze. "That has never happened before." The human lowered his weapon slightly, studying him. "Good," he said finally. "Maybe next time you won't rely on it at all." The squad leader let out another weak chuckle. "Next time," he coughed, "you might not win." The human smirked. "Maybe." He stepped back, holstering his weapon. "But we'll always fight." And with that, the humans walked away, leaving the battlefield behind. The squad leader lay there, staring up at the sky, realization settling in his bones. They hadn't just lost a battle. They had learned a lesson. And next time, the war wouldn't be the same. The battlefield was silent now. The fires had burned down to embers, and the smoke drifted lazily into the sky. Bodies, both human and alien, lay scattered across the ruined ground, their weapons lifeless beside them. The scent of blood, burnt metal, and ozone filled the air, the lingering reminder of the brutal fight that had just taken place. The squad leader remained where he had fallen, staring up at the gray clouds above. His body ached, his wounds pulsed with pain, and his strength was nearly gone. But his mind was still racing. He had lost. He had lost in a way no simulation, no training exercise, no calculation had ever predicted. And worse, the humans had let him live. That, more than anything, gnawed at him. His eye was still operational, though damaged. It flickered weakly in his vision, struggling to process the events that had unfolded. Battle reports, probability assessments, failure diagnostics, it all streamed across his display, but none of it made sense. The data pointed to one undeniable truth. They should have won. And yet, they hadn't. The AI tried to categorize the defeat. Error. Tactical deviation detected. Error. Unquantifiable human behavior. Error. Predictive modeling failure. The squad leader exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of those words. Their war doctrine had been built on certainty. Their AI-driven strategy had crushed empires, subjugated civilizations, and reduced enemies to nothing more than predictable patterns. But humans had shattered that certainty. They had fought with instinct. They had adapted in ways the AI couldn't process. They had ignored the logical choice in favor of chaotic, reckless decisions, and those decisions had won them the battle. The squad leader clenched his fists. He had been arrogant. He had believed in the superiority of his kind, in the perfection of their strategies, in the inevitability of their victory. But he had been wrong. And now he had to decide what to do with that knowledge. A low hum echoed in the distance. Reinforcements. A sleek alien dropship descended from the sky, its hull still bearing the insignia of their fleet. It hovered just above the ground, its doors hissing open as armored figures stepped out. Medical officers, tactical officers, high command representatives. They had come to retrieve him. Two soldiers rushed forward, lifting the squad leader to his feet. His body protested, but he forced himself to stand. He wouldn't show weakness. Not now. Not after everything. A high-ranking officer stepped forward, his imposing figure towering over the others. His armor was pristine, untouched by battle. His cold, calculating eyes studied the ruined battlefield before settling on the squad leader. "Report," the officer commanded. The squad leader hesitated. For the first time in his life, he didn't know how to answer. He knew what the officer wanted to hear: excuses, malfunctions, unforeseen circumstances, a reason that could explain away the defeat. But none of those things would be true. "We lost," he said simply. The officer's expression barely changed. Explain. The squad leader swallowed. Our AI couldn't predict human tactics. They fought unpredictably. They adapted. They made choices no logical strategist would make. The officer's gaze darkened. So, you are saying we are weaker? The squad leader met his gaze. No, I am saying we are too rigid, too dependent on AI. He exhaled. The humans fought without certainty, and they won because of it. A long silence stretched between them. The other soldiers shifted uncomfortably, their gazes darting between the two. It was forbidden to question their war doctrine, to suggest that their AI was anything less than perfect. But the squad leader had seen the truth. The officer studied him for a moment longer, then turned away. You are injured. Return to the ship. You will be debriefed once we reach the command vessel. The squad leader hesitated. He wanted to say more. He wanted to warn them. But he knew they wouldn't listen. Not yet. As he was escorted onto the ship, he glanced back at the battlefield one last time. The humans were already gone, vanishing into the wreckage, preparing for their next fight. They hadn't just survived. They had learned. And if his people didn't learn too, then next time, it wouldn't just be a battle they lost. It would be the war. The squad leader sat in the cold metallic chamber of the warship, his wounds patched but his mind still raw. The hum of the engines vibrated through the floor beneath him, the steady pulse of technology that had always been the heart of their civilization. The air smelled sterile, the artificial oxygen carefully controlled, free of the blood and smoke that had filled his lungs on the battlefield. But nothing felt normal anymore. He wasn't the same soldier who had landed on that planet. The warship drifted in the black void of space, hanging just outside the atmosphere of the ruined battlefield below. Through the reinforced observation window, the planet stretched out beneath them, a broken world, its surface scarred by fire and war. In the distance, the wreckage of their own ships floated lifelessly, torn apart by unexpected resistance. His species had never feared war. They were war. Every battle before this had been predictable. They arrived. They assessed. They dominated. Every victory was clean, calculated, assured. The enemy never surprised them. Until now. The doors to the chamber slid open with a soft hiss, and the high-ranking officer stepped inside. His movements were stiff, controlled, but the squad leader could sense the unspoken tension beneath his composed exterior. He carried a data tablet in one hand, his long fingers gripping it tighter than necessary. The officer didn't speak immediately. He simply tapped the screen, bringing up a projection of the battle data. The squad leader didn't need to see it. He already knew what it would show. The erratic patterns, the failures in AI predictions, the moments where the humans had done the impossible. Finally, the officer spoke. They should have lost. The squad leader didn't answer. The officer's eyes narrowed. Our AI calculated a 99.7% chance of total human eradication within the first 3 hours of engagement. His tone was calm, but there was something underneath it, something that had never been there before. Doubt. The squad leader leaned forward. His body still ached, but his voice was steady. And yet, we were forced to retreat. The officer's jaw tensed. Explain. The squad leader met his gaze. We miscalculated. A heavy silence followed. No one ever said those words in their empire. Miscalculation was impossible. Their eye was flawless. Their strategies were perfect. But they had been wrong. The officer exhaled through his nose. What makes them different? The squad leader looked back out at the planet, at the battlefield where everything had changed. They aren't bound by logic, he said slowly. They fight with instinct, with unpredictability. They don't just follow orders. They break them when they need to. They take risks we would never consider. Risks that should get them killed, but don't. He clenched his fist. Our AI predicts based on patterns, based on history, based on certainty. But humans, they don't follow patterns. They create chaos. and then they thrive in it. The officer didn't respond. He simply stared at the battle data, his expression unreadable. The squad leader continued, "They don't fear death the way we do. They don't calculate the most efficient survival rate before making a move. Sometimes they charge straight into fire, knowing it will kill them, just to give their squad a 0.5-second advantage." The projection flickered, showing footage of a human soldier diving onto a grenade, not to survive, but to save the others. Another clip showed a human sniper taking a shot that no predictive AI model would have even considered possible, and hitting his target with perfect precision. The squad leader's voice was quieter now. "How do you predict an enemy that refuses to act in its own best interest?" The officer turned off the projection. His gaze was colder now, more distant. "And if they advance?" the officer asked. The squad leader didn't answer immediately. He thought about the battle, about the way the humans had fought, not just to survive, but to prove something. They had learned from this fight. They had adapted, and they would do it again. "If we go back," the squad leader said, "we won't be fighting the same humans." He looked directly at the officer. "They're already learning how to beat us." The officer's grip on the tablet tightened. "We will develop countermeasures." The squad leader shook his head. "So will they. And they'll do it faster." For the first time, the officer's composure cracked, just slightly. A flicker of something behind his gaze, something close to fear. The realization settled between them. This wasn't just a setback. It was a shift in the war. For the first time in history, they weren't just facing a new enemy. They were facing a species that could surpass them. The squad leader stood, his body still heavy from exhaustion, but his mind sharp. "We thought they were primitive," he said. "We thought their emotions, their unpredictability, their defiance made them weak." He turned to the officer, his next words cutting through the silence like a blade. "But those things don't make them weak." The squad leader exhaled, the weight of truth settling on his shoulders. "They make them unstoppable."